They say madness is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. But what if I told you that believing the official story of history is the real madness? What if the greatest architectural wonders of Europe, cathedrals that pierce the sky, monuments that dwarf our modern achievements, were never built by human hands at all? Not by the people they claim, anyway. Today, we're going to dismantle a 1,000-year-old lie. And the weapon we'll use, simple mathematics. The kind they can't argue with. The kind that exposes everything. Our journey begins in Reims, France. Standing before you is not just a building, it's an accusation written in stone. The Reims Cathedral. Look at it. Stone vaults that defy gravity, soaring toward the heavens. The facade alone contains thousands of individual sculptures, each one a masterpiece that would take a modern artist months to complete. This is not construction. This is frozen music, a symphony carved from the bones of mountains. The official story? Construction began in 1211, and here's where it gets interesting. They claim it was finished in just 80 years. 80 years in an age without electricity, without cranes, without computers, without even the concept of architectural engineering as we know it. Let that sink in. Now, I want you to imagine something. Close your eyes if you need to. Picture a world where the only power source is a horse, where the most advanced tool is a hammer and chisel, where calculations are done with an abacus if you're lucky, where most people can't even read. In this world, supposedly, master craftsmen designed mathematical marvels that modern engineers study with reverence. They calculated load-bearing stress that requires advanced physics. They achieved precision that we replicate today using laser-guided equipment. And they did it all in the dark, literally, by candlelight. Does that sound right to you? Or does it sound like a fairy tale we've been told so many times we forgot to question it? But here's what they don't want you to think about. Reims is not unique. It's not even unusual. This exact same story, this impossible achievement, repeats itself across Europe. Chartres, Notre-Dame, Cologne, Salisbury, Canterbury, Milan, each one a mathematical impossibility, each one built in record time by people who supposedly lived in mud huts. These structures stand today like accusations, like evidence at a crime scene that the investigators refuse to examine. We, with all our technology, all our knowledge, all our machinery, we look at these buildings and cannot answer the simplest question: how? How did they do it? The silence from official historians is deafening. Let's talk about what it actually takes to build something like this. Every stone you see was cut with mathematical precision, precision that requires not just skill, but understanding of geometry that supposedly didn't exist yet. Every vault, every arch, every flying buttress represents calculations of stress, weight distribution, and material strength. These are disciplines that took us centuries to formalize into science. Yet somehow, illiterate peasants in the so-called Dark Ages had mastered them perfectly on the first try. No prototypes, no failed attempts, no learning curve, just instant perfection. And before you say trial and error, where are the failures? Show me the collapsed cathedrals. Show me the architectural mistakes. They don't exist. It's as if someone handed them a finished blueprint from the future. Now, let's address the elephant in the room that historians pretend isn't there: logistics. Millions, and I mean millions, of tons of stone, each block weighing hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. Where did it come from? Official records are mysteriously vague. How was it transported? They tell us wooden carts and manual labor. Really, do the math. A single large stone block could take dozens of men days to move just a few miles, and they needed hundreds of thousands of these blocks. Where are the records of the quarries? Where are the transportation routes? Where are the accounts of the thousands, no, tens of thousands of workers who would have been needed? Where did they live? What did they eat? Who paid them? The historical record is silent, almost like it never happened. But here's where it gets truly suspicious. There's a pattern, a template so obvious, so repeatedly used, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Fire. Almost every major cathedral has the same backstory. It was built on the site of an older wooden church that tragically burned down. Reims? Fire. Notre-Dame's predecessor? Fire. Chartres? Fire. It's almost comical how often this exact same story appears. What are the odds? In an age where stone was the primary building material for anything important, why were all these crucial churches made of wood? And why did they all conveniently burn down right before a massive construction boom? It's too perfect, too convenient. It's a narrative device, a plot hole filled with fire, so we don't ask the real question. This fire narrative serves a crucial purpose in the official story. It explains why construction suddenly began. It creates an illusion of continuity, linking the inexplicable stone masterpiece to a simpler, more believable past. But from a mathematical probability standpoint, it's absurd. We're talking about hundreds of these coincidental fires across Europe, all followed by immediate construction booms, all resulting in architectural perfection. That's not history. That's a script, a cover story written by people who found these buildings and needed to explain them. So, who built Reims Cathedral? Official history gives us a name, Jean d'Orbais. Sounds legitimate, right? But watch what happens when you actually investigate this man. Who was he? Where did he study? Where are his blueprints, his calculations, his architectural treatises? Where are his students, his school, his other works? The answer to all these questions is nothing. There's nothing, just a name attached to buildings, some of which were supposedly started 600 years apart. 600 years! This isn't a person, it's a placeholder, a name inserted into the gaps of history to give authorship to something that was already there. And Jean d'Orbais isn't alone. Across Europe, these master builders appear in records with no background, no training, no previous work, and no successors. They're ghosts, convenient ghosts. Now, let's stop dealing with stories and legends. Let's turn to something that cannot lie, mathematics. Numbers don't have agendas. They can't be rewritten by victors or revised by committees. And what we're about to do is simple, but devastating. We're going to use official population data, data that historians themselves provide, and run it backward. If population growth follows a consistent mathematical pattern, then we should be able to reverse engineer the population of any point in history. So let's do exactly that. Let's see what the numbers tell us about the 13th century, when all these impossible cathedrals were supposedly being built. The results will shock you. We'll start with data we trust. England's population in 1800, approximately 9 million. Today, over 65 million. Spain in 1950, around 28 million. Today, nearly 48 million. These are documented, verifiable growth patterns. Now, we take this rate of growth, the official rate, and we reverse it. We calculate backwards. Ready? Let's watch the human population disappear. 1900, the world holds roughly 1.6 billion people. That seems reasonable. 1886, we're down to 928 million. Still plausible.
1817, 314 million globally. Now we're seeing a serious drop, far below what official sources claim. 1748, only 106 million people on the entire planet. That's less than modern-day Japan, spread across every continent. The world is getting very empty, very fast. Now we enter dangerous territory. The year 1610, the height of the Renaissance, the age of exploration, global empires. According to our calculations, the entire human population would have been just 11.8 million people, fewer than Moscow today. Think about that. Massive wars, global trade, the colonization of the Americas, all conducted by a population that could fit inside a single modern city. The story is already falling apart, but we're not done, not even close, because now we arrive at the 1200s, the exact period when Reims and dozens of other impossible cathedrals were being built, the moment of truth. And the number we get is 18,700 on the entire planet.
Let me repeat that so it truly sinks in. When Reims Cathedral was supposedly under construction, when stones weighing tons were being precisely cut and lifted hundreds of feet into the air, when intricate sculptures were being carved by the thousands, when complex vaulted ceilings requiring advanced mathematical knowledge were being built, the entire population of planet Earth would have been 18,700 people. That's a small town, a neighborhood, a single apartment complex, and we're told that from this tiny group, spread across every continent, enough skilled laborers, engineers, and artists were available to build hundreds of architectural masterpieces simultaneously across Europe alone. The mathematics doesn't just contradict the official story, it obliterates it. It's not unlikely, it's not improbable, it is impossible. So, if the people of the 13th century didn't build these cathedrals because they mathematically couldn't have, then who did? There's only one answer that fits all the evidence. These buildings are not medieval. They're pre-medieval. They're the remnants of a previous, far more advanced civilization, a global culture that possessed technology and knowledge we're only now beginning to rediscover. The people of the Middle Ages didn't build these structures. They found them. They inhabited them. They tried to maintain them, often failing. And later, when new timelines were being written, they were told these buildings were theirs, a gift from their ancestors, a lie to fill the gap in memory. And we have proof of this. Early photographs from the 1850s and 1860s show these cathedrals exactly as I'm describing. They're not new constructions. They're ancient, weathered, often partially buried in soil that has accumulated over centuries. Around them, 19th century life, people in simple clothing, horse-drawn carts, primitive tools. The contrast is staggering. These aren't photos of builders. These are photos of scavengers, of survivors living among ruins they don't fully understand. The buildings look old even in photos from 170 years ago. How old must they actually be? This is the evidence they don't show you in textbooks. These photographs don't fit the narrative, so they're ignored. But perhaps the most damning evidence is something hiding in cycling plaint: the symbols. All across the world, from Europe to Asia, from cathedrals to temples, we find the same motifs repeated with eerie consistency. The griffin, for example, a mythical creature that official history scatters across different cultures as independent invention, yet we see it rendered in virtually identical styles on buildings thousands of miles apart, in Athens, in Paris, in Central Asia. Same proportions, same architectural language, same architectural context. This isn't coincidence. This is a signature, a unified civilization leaving its mark on every continent. One world, one culture, one technology.
and all of it systematically erased from our history books. But we're not finished with our mathematical experiment. If the pattern holds, let's take it to its ultimate conclusion. Let's go all the way back. Year 900 AD, year 800 AD, year 700. The numbers continue to plummet. And then we reach the year 600 AD. According to the same mathematical model based on official data, the global population at this point would have been 3 people. 3, not 3 million, not 3,000, 3 individual human beings on the entire planet. This is the final absurdity. This is where the official timeline doesn't just crack, it shatters completely. We have 2 options. Either human history began around 600 AD and everything before is fiction, or, and this is the only logical conclusion, our history was interrupted. Something happened, something catastrophic that reset everything.
This is the key that unlocks everything. A global cataclysm, a reset event in the relatively recent past, possibly as recent as the late 18th century, perhaps around 1776, a date deliberately chosen for symbolic rebirth. Everything makes sense if we accept this. The cathedrals are pre-cataclysm technology. The lost knowledge was lost in the disaster. The rapid population growth of the 1800s wasn't continuation, it was recovery from near extinction. And the entire historical narrative we're taught is post-cataclysm propaganda designed to explain a world and incorporate ruins that the survivors didn't build and couldn't understand. They found these structures, claimed them, and invented a past to legitimize their present. Our civilization isn't thousands of years old. It's maybe 250 years old, built on the bones of something far greater. Imagine the world after such an event. Scattered survivors, traumatized, knowledge fragmented. They emerge to find impossible structures still standing, cathedrals, castles, aqueducts, monuments, buildings they could never hope to recreate. What do? They move in, they claim them, they invent stories about their ancestors building them in the Dark Ages, conveniently a period with almost no written records. They create mythical architects and phantom construction timelines, and over generations, the lie becomes accepted truth. The survivor's fantasy becomes official history, and anyone who questions it is labeled a conspiracy theorist. But the mathematics doesn't lie. The buildings don't lie. Only the story lies. Look at the evidence with fresh eyes. These buildings across continents share not just similar styles, but identical engineering principles, proportional systems, and symbolic languages. The Gothic cathedrals of Europe, the ancient temples of Asia, the mysterious megaliths scattered worldwide. They're all speaking the same architectural language because they came from the same source, a unified global civilization that existed before the reset. We've been taught to see separate cultures developing independently, but that's the cover story. The truth is visible in every carved stone, every repeated symbol, every impossible construction technique. One world, one lost civilization, and we're living in its shadow, pretending we built it. Some call this lost civilization Tartaria. Others give it different names. The name doesn't matter. What matters is the evidence of its existence. Maps from the 18th century showing vast territories in Asia labeled Tartary, territories that mysteriously vanish from later maps. Buildings across Russia, Europe, and Asia sharing identical architectural features. Advanced infrastructure, star forts, underground tunnel systems, continental railway networks that supposedly primitive societies couldn't have built.
and all of it carefully written out of history, replaced with tales of Mongol hordes and medieval kingdoms. The more you look, the more you realize they're hiding an entire civilization from us. And it wasn't just advanced architecture. There's evidence of sophisticated technology we still don't fully understand. Anomalous artifacts, energy systems embedded in building designs, acoustic properties in cathedrals that suggest knowledge of harmonic frequencies, electrical potential in certain architectural elements, underground networks that span continents. This wasn't primitive society. This was advanced science wrapped in what we now mistake for decoration. Every gargoyle, every column, every dome potentially served a function we've forgotten. We look at these buildings as art, but they were technology, and someone deliberately made sure we forgot that. The question becomes, who rewrote history and why? After the cataclysm, power vacuums emerged, new authorities rose from the ashes, and the best way to legitimize new power is to control the narrative of the past. Imagine inheriting a world full of impossible structures. You can't replicate them, you barely understand them. So what do? You claim them by your ancestors. You create a historical timeline that makes you the heir to greatness. You suppress any evidence that contradicts this story. You establish institutions, universities, historical societies that enforce your version of events. And within a few generations, the truth becomes conspiracy theory, and your lie becomes settled history. That's what we're living in, the aftermath of the greatest historical deception ever perpetrated. So what do we do with this information? First, we stop accepting convenient answers. We question timelines that don't add up. We demand mathematical consistency from official narratives. We look at the world around us, at the buildings, the symbols, the patterns, with eyes unclouded by indoctrination. The evidence is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, waiting for people brave enough to see it. Every cathedral is a witness. Every impossible structure is testimony. Every mathematical inconsistency is a crack in the lie. The truth has been buried, but it can't stay buried forever. Mathematics is the shovel, and we've just begun to dig.
Before we conclude, there's one more layer to this deception we need to expose. Because it's not just about cathedrals. It's not just about population numbers. It's about a systematic pattern of historical manipulation that repeats itself across every aspect of our accepted timeline. Let me show you how deep this really goes. Think about what we've discovered. Mathematical impossibilities, phantom architects with no verifiable history, convenient fires that destroy evidence, structures that defy the technological capabilities of their supposed era. Now, ask yourself, where else do we see these exact same patterns? The answer is everywhere. The Great Library of Alexandria, conveniently burned, destroying countless records of the ancient world. The Dark Ages, conveniently a period with almost no surviving documentation. The Renaissance, conveniently when humanity suddenly rediscovered all this lost knowledge. Do you see the template? Destruction, darkness, then miraculous rebirth. Fire, forgetting, then finding. It's the same story, told over and over in every corner of official history. And it's not just in Europe. The same pattern appears globally. Ancient megalithic structures in Peru, built with precision we can't replicate today, attributed to primitive cultures using stone tools. Massive underground cities in Turkey, capable of housing tens of thousands, supposedly carved out by hand.
temple complexes in Asia displaying astronomical knowledge that shouldn't exist. And in every case, the official explanation follows the same template. Primitive people, basic tools, unlimited time, and somehow impossible perfection. But here's what they can't explain away. The timeline itself keeps breaking. Carbon dating that contradicts historical records, architectural styles that appear in the wrong centuries, technologies that show up too early, artifacts that don't fit the narrative. And whenever these anomalies are discovered, what happens? They are either ignored, explained away with increasingly absurd theories, or the evidence mysteriously disappears. Let's talk about something they really don't want you to think about: the mud flood phenomenon. In photographs from the 1800s and early 1900s, we see buildings, beautiful, ornate buildings, partially buried in earth. First floors that are now basements, grand entrances that are now below street level, windows that have become foundations. The official explanation? Development, urban planning, raised streets. Really? Across entire continents? Affecting thousands of structures, all in the same period? That's not development. That's evidence of a recent catastrophic event that deposited meters of mud and sediment across the civilized world. And notice how they never want to talk about the world's fairs. The Columbian Exposition of 1893, the Pan American Exposition of 1901, massive, ornate, impossibly beautiful structures covering hundreds of acres, built in months according to official records, only to be demolished immediately after. Why? We're told they were temporary plaster buildings, but photographs show stone, steel, sophisticated electrical systems, advanced water features. These weren't temporary fairgrounds, these were cities, pre-existing cities that were rediscovered, repurposed, photographed, and then systematically destroyed to erase the evidence of what came before. The chronology is crumbling, and those in power know it. That's why they control education so tightly. That's why they ridicule anyone who questions the official timeline. That's why certain topics are labeled conspiracy theory before they're even investigated. Because if the chronology falls, everything else falls with it. The legitimacy of governments, the authority of institutions, the entire power structure of the modern world is built on the foundation of a fabricated history, and they will do anything to protect that foundation. But the cracks are showing. More people are asking questions, more researchers are finding anomalies, more evidence is coming to light that contradicts the official story. The truth, as they say, wants to be free. And mathematics, beautiful, impartial, undeniable mathematics, is the key that unlocks every door they've tried to seal shut. So here we are at the end of our investigation. But really, this is just the beginning, because now you know. Now you've seen the evidence. Now you understand that the story they've been telling us doesn't add up. The mathematics doesn't work. The timeline doesn't hold. The official narrative is a carefully constructed illusion. All of it points to one inescapable conclusion. We are living in the shadow of a previous civilization. This investigation ends here, but your investigation, that's just beginning. Look at your city. Look at the old buildings. Look at the architecture that seems too advanced for its supposed era. The stones remember, the numbers don't lie, and the truth, no matter how long buried, eventually finds its way to the surface. Welcome to the other side of the veil. Welcome to the awakening. The only question now is, how many others will you help wake up?